Hi everybody. So with the exception of hydro, it's a well-known thing that renewables, so wind and solar, are generally more expensive than conventional generation. It's supposed to reverse somewhere between 2020 and 2040. However, when have you ever known a projection to come true? It's a little bit of a no-brainer that if all you're interested in is the energy, well, go buy a generator and pour something in that you can burn. For renewable energy, it makes it a much more difficult job. It's a bit like a salmon swimming upstream. You've got to have other reasons for wanting renewable energy apart from just generating energy. And you can understand why that would be the case. I mean, you know, a wind tower, it takes tons of concrete, gallons of fiberglass. That fiberglass is going nowhere for 100,000 years. Solar is very intensive. It's a strip mining operation, purification, energy intensive, lots of pollutants and relatively expensive. So there's lots of things really operating around it that makes that the case. Thankfully, there is an alternative. Now, nobody really knows where kites came from, although they can be located in Asia. The Chinese claim the first kites in something like the 5th century BC, but the earliest known depiction of a kite was around about 9,500 to 9,000 BC, making them somewhere around 1,100 years old. It was the Munai people who actually still use this style of kite that developed, that painted that cave painting. And that cave painting can be found in Muna Island, southwest Sulawesi, Indonesia. From there it's thought to have moved to China, and from China, of course, it moved to India. The Chinese used the kite for a whole host of things, including measuring distances, wind speed, travel, military communications, and they have said to have lifted men with kites. In India, they became famous as the fighting kites, and it wasn't until around the 13th century that Marco Polo brought the kite back to Europe. The kite in Europe was first recorded as a drawing, I believe, in about the 1800s, and of course the 19th century it was used by the Wright brothers to measure wind speeds and enjoyed something called the golden age of kiting. They lived about the period from 1860 to 1910 across Europe, and they're still used today, obviously, for things like scientific measurements, and there's been a whole host of kite developments, including the Eddie's Tailless Diamond Kite, the Rogallo Wing, the sled kite, parafoils and power kites. So kites have an extraordinary long and illustrious history. It wasn't until about the 1970s when Lloyd suggested using kites for power generation, and he did some early experiments then. Unfortunately, of course, there wasn't the electronics to control the kites, nor the materials available. That has all changed, obviously. Now, kites can only really operate in two ways in order to generate power. One way is to lift them, and as they lift, drag a rope which is wound round a drum, and that operates a turbine. When you get it to its height, you can change the pitch and it will literally drop to the ground. When it gets low enough down, you can change it again and it will fly and pull that drum, and that's one way of generating energy. Another way is to make them go around in circles, and as they go around in circles, they're tethered to the ground and they can run a generator because they're rotating. There has been a huge growth of interest in kite-based generators. In 2017, there were something like 60 companies involved and research institutes in kite-based generation. And what's cool about kite-based generation is it's scalable, both up and down. So it can go from megawatt scale industrial kites that have been developed by larger companies to even smaller systems like the one by Rob Reed on the Isle of Lewis, where he basically uses a kite to lift his kite-like structure that rotates in the wind, connected to a bicycle wheel, connected to a generator. And Rod claims that he can charge his electric car, he's got plenty of energy to boil water, so a very successful smaller scale which the individual could build. And of course that always appeals to me, because it's great to look at what companies are doing and what the future might be like for mass generation, but it's also great to be able to do your own thing and to generate at a scale that's reasonable at home. And the reasons really that kites are so interesting is their lack of structure. So it could be that an 11,000-year-old technology is going to come to our aid in the 21st century. Anyway, I hope you found that was interesting. Thank you very much for watching, and please do remember to like and subscribe.